Today, we're going to think about marriage as a lifelong journey to joy. Yes, I'm optimistic about your journey, and I know you will encounter problems along the way. The solutions are simple, but not always obvious or easy. So, today I'm going to show you how problems in your relationship are simply romantic roadblocks that point the way to the next milestone on your journey. Hello, I'm Dr. Debi, and I've been helping men, women, and couples grow together for more than 25 years. Now it's your turn to learn what I learned and taught as a couples counselor and university professor. You are the wise woman, and this is your personal development podcast packed with instant encouragement and practical tips. And men can learn about women too, because this is a safe place where women are valued and men are respected. We talk about biology, socialization, behavior, emotions, communication, and connection, because men and women are different. Always have been, always will be, and that's a very good thing. What I discovered about both men and women was surprising, beautiful, and amazingly simple. Our respective desires are different, but they're complementary, almost as if they were God designed. I discovered that every woman dreams about being swept off her feet by a man who knows how to lead gently and confidently, protecting her and guiding her on the dance floor of life. She has no problem following him and giving herself to him. She adores him because she knows he wants only the best for her. How does she know? Because he listens to her, comforts and reassures her, and takes everything she says under consideration as he choreographs their dance. Oops, I just switched metaphors on you, didn't I? Sorry about that. I also discovered that every man dreams about a sweet companion with whom he can share his life. He is inspired by her and motivated to protect and provide for her. He wants to spend time with her because she reflects all that's right and good about him. When he messes up, he instantly knows, without her saying a word, because he is sensitive to everything about her. He feels safe with her because her feedback is always gentle, discreet, and affirming. Plus, he knows he can count on her to make him look good to anyone who's watching. Do you think that's true about your mate? If things aren't going well for you right now, you probably find it hard to believe what I just said. If so, you're in good company, because everyone, despite his or her best efforts, runs into a roadblock sooner or later. So, what is a relational roadblock? Well, it's anything that disrupts the flow of your romance. And it probably happened much earlier in your own relationship than you care to admit. Human beings are notoriously good at ignoring problems, especially when they're in love. We want to hold on to the romantic high, so we find a way to go around the problem to protect the relationship. Now, that's not an issue if it only happens once, but often the pattern repeats and repeats until it becomes a deep rut that you can't get out of. So when you first start out, you're creating a relationship and you've got nothing but green lights. It's just like, it is so cool. It is so much fun. That's what makes you want to be together. So this is not relatively smooth circle as you're going around in just your normal interactions with one another, and it feels wonderful. And so you repeat that, several times, and it feels really, really good. That's why you decided to stay in the relationship. But it doesn't take very long before something happens, and it's usually at the very beginning of a relationship. It doesn't happen 20 years later. It actually happens within a very short period of time of when you start interacting with one another. You've got this attraction going on. You don't want to mess it up. But then all of a sudden, there's this, what I call a roadblock. And when you hit that roadblock, you don't want to acknowledge it. It's like a red flag. It's like, let's avoid this at all costs. So you change your path. And when you change your path, you actually you approach that roadblock and you go, oh, I don't want to do that. And you go around it. Okay? So here you are. Now you've got this lump, and now your map has changed. And maybe you hit another roadblock somewhere along the way. And now you've got to change again. So now your relationship, instead of going in the round in the green circle, now you've got these issues that you don't want to talk about because they make you feel vulnerable. They make you feel hurt. They make you feel rejected, disrespected, devalued. Something is just not right. And so you continue to try to avoid those things. And you do that over and over again. And now it begins to define your entire relationship. And you can see after you've repeated this, even just a short amount of time, it's almost like you forgot what it looked like before. Because now you've created this new map of your relationship. Plus that, there's a lot of emotion involved in that. And when you get that much emotion going on, then this starts to glow red hot with all kinds of fiery emotions, maybe even anger, but definitely pain. And to change that cycle, to get you back to that nice, smooth, green flow of things that you enjoyed in the beginning, the first thing that you actually have to do is you have to get that emotion calmed down, okay? So you need to remove some of the fire. And you do that by slowing down the process so that you can actually see and hear what the other person is telling you. Because trust me, you are reacting in a very negative way to the other person's pain. And you don't realize it's pain because that defensiveness comes across as an attack. And that attack doesn't feel good to you. So you attack back, you counterattack, or you counter avoid. And neither one of those are going to be helpful. So we get the fire out of the relationship. And then we start to go again. And we're going to come upon this and we're going to go, oh, what happened? We're going to pause and we're going to evaluate, what is this? What just happened? How can I understand better where you're coming from? How can I respond more lovingly towards what just happened? But if you don't tell your partner what just happened or have somebody help your partner understand what just happened, you're not going to do anything any differently. And part of the way that you can figure out what just happened is by understanding the opposite sex and how to relate to them in the process. So you've got some sort of a template for understanding what it might be. And in that way, you can help facilitate the process. So, for instance, one of the things that happens with women most often is that we get our feelings hurt. So I'm just going to put hurt feelings. Okay. And if you notice something happens, if you're the guy and you notice something just happened, you stop and you just go, wait a minute. Did I just hurt your feelings? I get a sense that I did. And then a woman can say to him, yes, you did. And then he just says, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. And then you can move on. So now you've come across this, you've dealt with it, and now you can move on to the next issue. Okay, because there's going to be another one, because both of you have problems in relating to one another, but still now you're starting to change that pattern because you know how to work your way through it. Okay, so that's the goal, is to work your way through it and to overcome the negative stuff that's happened in the past. Now we get up here to this one. Here's another roadblock. And let's say that this time it's the man who got triggered. If you're aware of how sensitive men are and you're the woman, you can say, did that feel disrespectful to you? I can't talk and write at the same time. Disrespect. This is funny. Disrespectful. There we go. And if he is bold, he will say, yes, that did feel disrespectful. And she can learn along the way, again, What is it about men in particular that makes them incredibly sensitive to being disrespected as a man? So, a lot of times it's about a man's identity and that he feels disrespected as a man. Not just disrespected as a human, but disrespected in who he's intended to be. And when you learn what those are, then you're able to respond in a different way. Okay, so you can go around that in a different way. I teach you how to do that in the courses. So once you do that, then now you can move on and you get back to where you know how to work through an issue that's going to be for your partner. So you can see it takes a little bit of time to rebuild that. Unless you understand what this is right here, you have to understand what those roadblocks are and how to work your way through them. You're going to stay in that negative pattern. At that point, you don't even realize what's happening. You just follow the map you created together, growing further and further apart and using the bulk of your mental and emotional energy to maintain that pattern. It's a bumpy ride for both of you. Nevertheless, you always have the freedom to choose. You can avoid the roadblocks in your marriage. It's a complicated strategy, but it comes naturally. That is, it doesn't take any forethought. Just live defensively. Protect yourself. Keep quiet. Don't rock the boat. Let your mate make the decisions and be in charge of everything. But in the long run, that strategy will leave you feeling like the victim in your own story, powerless to change anything or to have any control over your own life. On the other hand, you could choose to power your way through the roadblocks, like a steamroller on a mission. Don't back down on anything. Take charge. Be the boss. Be aggressive. Be angry if you need to. If that's your strategy, your mate is probably passive, acting like a victim. Someone needs to step up. Your mate isn't doing it or can't do it. But using this strategy over the long haul, you will become the villain in your own story. Being the villain is exhausting because you're heavily invested in every single outcome. And sadly, you've surrendered the possibility of being loved. Or maybe you started out as someone who avoids roadblocks, but you've taken it as long as you can. So you've switched over into anger and become the villain. Or a more likely scenario, you're angry with yourself for being angry with your mate. That's pretty common, especially among Christian men. Now you're your own worst enemy, filled with self-loathing for being such a wimp. The effect is the same as trying to drive a car with your foot on the brake. But what if there were a third option? What if you didn't have to be the victim or the villain, but could become the hero or heroine of your own story instead? In reality, the solution is simple. Not always obvious or easy, of course, but simple nonetheless. Let's talk about how to turn those roadblocks into milestones. First, pause and take a good long look at that roadblock. Don't just crash through it, dismiss it, or turn a blind eye. Really take a look at it. Chances are you've complained to one or more of your friends about it already. It's equally likely that they get where you're coming from because the same thing has happened to them. Yes, both men and women have had the same complaints about one another forever. And that's actually good news. If our complaints about one another sound so familiar, then we've got a lot of data to consider. Like every good scientist, though, you need to learn how to interpret the data correctly. But most of us don't have an accurate template of the opposite sex. We don't listen to one another because we're more invested in being right than we are in understanding and being understood or loved. That's how I learned the truth about men. First, I learned to listen. Then, I listened to learn. And along the way, I listened to and learned about women, including myself. Once I had charted the territory and created the maps showing potential roadblocks and how to interpret them, my work became a joyous and endless treasure hunt for truth in relationships. To give you an idea of how to use the map, let me give you a couple of examples. Max and Leah had been married a little more than a year when I first met them, but they'd already hit a major roadblock. The truth is, they first hit that roadblock while they were dating, and it had rapidly grown to major proportions. Leah described their relationship in great detail, including the interaction that brought them to my office. Throughout the session, Max sat in silence. He spoke when I spoke to him, but offered nothing in terms of their reason for being there. Everything I learned about the situation came from Leah and Max's nonverbal communication, which was screaming volumes into my heart. In short, Leah often had concerns and would bring them up for discussion, more than once. Each time, Max would go quiet and manage to leave the room. At first, she would back up too, but it wasn't long before she would make another attempt. Same topic, same outcome. The last time he walked away from her, she stood there confused and alone. She waited a bit, then followed him into the bedroom. He was still quiet, but he looked angry, though she didn't understand why. Suddenly, she was afraid of him. He hadn't lashed out, but she was terrified that he was about to do so. I helped them recognize their interactional pattern. Leah pursued and Max withdrew. Leah upped the ante with verbal attacks, blaming him and criticizing him for not responding. Max kept adding bricks to his protective wall. He didn't want to throw them at her, so he let them pile up instead. She felt abandoned and tried every tactic she could to get through the wall. They were stuck. Max just wanted peace. He'd grown up in a chaotic home where he often stepped in to protect his younger siblings from his parents' rage. He was willing to take a beating to spare the little ones. But he didn't know what to do with his wife's rage. He didn't understand that his silence was actually fueling her rage, and she didn't know how to stop raging. In our work together, I taught Leah that a man is more sensitive than we've been told he is. A woman is sensitive to getting her feelings hurt, which is the equivalent of crushing her spirit. For a man, it's about his masculine identity. When his wife scolds him or gives him advice, he feels a deep sense of shame, like he did when he was a little boy. As soon as Leah would begin to speak, Max's heart rate would go through the roof. His autonomic nervous system would launch him into fight, flight, or freeze mode. He literally couldn't think. He was speechless. He didn't want to fight with her. He'd spent his entire life avoiding fights, and he was trying hard not to run away. So he froze and quietly drifted into a different room, hoping the storm would subside. Once Leah understood what was happening for Max, she was able to approach the sensitive subjects from a different, less accusatory position. Then she would allow him space and time to think before expecting a response, and she changed their pattern. Then Max began to realize that Leah just wanted to address problems, not blame him for them. Theirs was a simple solution, but not readily obvious to either of them. And it definitely wasn't easy for them to take a closer look at what had been happening to them. But they did it. They created a healthier path and turned their roadblock into a milestone. Jeff and Lisa's story was different. They'd been married for 23 years, and many of their friends admired their relationship. Then one day, Lisa saw a text from a young woman on Jeff's phone. Katie was single and having trouble with her car. Jeff had stepped in and helped her, without saying anything to his wife. Lisa was furious, suspecting him of being involved in an extramarital affair. During our first session, she launched attack after attack on him. She agreed that he had been a good provider for their family, reliable, at home every night. She felt like a fool. that he had misled her and lied about the man he really was. Her pain was so intense that she couldn't hear anything he said. They had hit a roadblock. My work was cut out for me. We explored the pattern of their couple interactions before they hit the roadblock, before Katie. Turns out they were leading parallel lives. Lisa prided herself on being an independent spirit. She loved adventure and would often go off on trips with her girlfriends. Jeff never objected. He just stayed home, continued working, and held down the fort while she was gone. That was Jeff's pattern. He worked and provided for his family and found satisfaction in seeing them all happy. He never told Lisa what he needed from her, probably because he didn't give it any thought. Most men don't. Even if they do think about it, they've been taught to avoid vulnerability, so they don't know how or where to begin in talking about their own feelings. Lisa didn't realize her husband didn't feel wanted or needed, or that he was starving for appreciation. But even that wasn't the bottom line for him. Like every man I've ever met, Jeff longed to be a hero. Lisa didn't seem to need a hero, but Katie did, and she let him be that for her, with her car. There was nothing more to it than that. Jeff was faithful and committed to his wife, no matter how little he got in return. On the other hand, Jeff had no idea that his act of heroism would hurt his wife so deeply. His explanations just sounded like excuses, defensive justifications for his actions. You need to know that he never attacked Lisa for anything during our work together. He just needed to stop avoiding, to learn how to step into Lisa's pain with her. He did, and that's how he became his wife's hero. A closer look at their roadblock, a deeper understanding of their respective male and female perspectives, and a few simple changes in how they handled the roadblock turned it into a milestone in their marriage. In Jeff's own words, "After seeing Dr. Debi, I feel much closer to my wife and realize she's the most important thing I have in my life, and I will protect her to my last breath." Spoken like a hero. Is there a roadblock in your path right now? Remember, you always have options. A victim avoids the roadblock. A villain attacks the roadblock. A hero looks for an upgrade, a way to turn the roadblock into a milestone. What's your next move going to be? Well, I would suggest you start by learning yourself. What are you thinking and feeling right now? What are you doing? Are you protecting yourself? Attacking, blaming, or criticizing your mate? Then, learn your mate. What is your mate thinking and feeling right now? What is your mate doing? Is your mate in self-protect mode? Attacking, blaming, or criticizing you? Finally, learn your marriage. Marriage is a journey. Roadblocks are inevitable. With the right map, you can turn them into milestones on your lifelong journey to a joyful marriage. Thank you for listening to this episode of A Wise Woman's Guide to Men and Marriage. What did you think? Did the information raise more questions? Do you want to learn more? Head over to wisewomansguide.com for show notes and links to the resources mentioned in this episode. And if you're looking for other wise women to bounce around ideas and ask questions, be sure to join my exclusive community for women on Facebook. The link is waiting for you at awisewomansguide.com.